These are the strangest graves in the entire world. This grieving mother added a sandbox to her little boy's grave who had passed away unexpectedly, and now his older brother plays in it every single day. This is the gravesite of a boy who died of an incurable illness in 1865. A few hours before he died, he told his dad he was scared of death because he knew they would bury him underground with no light. So his parents honored his wish and put a window in his tomb. After her daughter died of yellow fever in 1892, a grieving mother wanted to make sure that her little girl was never alone. You see, her daughter was absolutely terrified of storms, so she constructed a staircase that goes directly down into her tomb. Every time there was a thunderstorm, that mother would go to the graveyard and sit with her daughter for hours, comforting her in her grave.
Explaining Phobias, Part 1. Submechanophobia. Submechanophobia is the fear of submerged man-made objects, especially if they're like underwater or partially hidden. Now you see, this specific phobia is actually not recognized by the DSM. The DSM recognizes most typical anxiety disorder. But this phobia is very real and commonly reported, and as it's extremely interesting, but you know what else is interesting?
The craziest execution methods, Part 13. The classic cement shoes, sometimes referred to as a Chicago overcoat. This one, as we all know, is associated with the Mafia and gangs, allegedly performed on living or deceased victims. Your feet or sometimes your whole legs would be encased in wet cement. After it dries, you are thrown into the deep ocean with them hoping your body is never discovered. Now this one is interesting because there's actually only one documented case of this ever, which is that of Brooklyn gang member Peter Martinez, also known as Petey Crack. His body was discovered in 2016.
We've officially entered the second week and some truly apocalyptic scenes are coming out of Iran right now. So here's everything you need to know. Overnight, Israel carried out large strikes targeting Iran's oil refineries and storage facilities for the first time. This caused enormous fires and plumes of thick black smoke that filled the skies of Tehran. The fires were so bright that one resident told the BBC it was as if night had turned into day. But when morning came, it was the opposite. Thick, dark clouds blocked out the sun, and a CNN reporter on the ground showed that the rain had blackened and appeared to have become saturated with oil.
But you can see that the rain water is actually black, also saturated, it appears, with oil. And then if we look over there, you can see that the water that's running down here, this sort of oil filled rain that we have right now.
Similar shocking scenes came out of Kuwait, where a large government building was engulfed in flames after being hit by a suspected drone amid a wave of Iranian strikes on the country. Yesterday in Dubai, passengers were taken into tunnels and flights were briefly suspended after a drone struck nearby. Cautions over the weekend were heightened for terror attacks after a Southwest Airlines flight was diverted to Atlanta in response to a possible security matter.
Yeah, this time we need everybody to have their heads down and hands up. Heads down, hands up.
Let's go. Stand up. Stand up.
The US Embassy in Oslo, Norway was hit by an explosive early Sunday morning, causing minor damage but no injuries, while in New York, 2 people were arrested after igniting suspicious devices during an anti-Islam protest. All 3 cases are still under investigation. The Israeli military came out and warned that it will pursue every successor of Iran's former supreme leader. Trump claimed that the US has sunk 42 Iranian ships in just 6 days, and that he also couldn't care less anymore which allied countries help in the war, saying it's a little late. And lastly, because much of the Middle East is just dry desert, freshwater distillation plants are now being targeted. Bahrain claimed that an Iranian drone attack caused damage to one of their plants, while Iran themselves are accusing the US of bombing one of their own in Qasem Island, calling it a blatant and desperate crime. See you all tomorrow for Day 10.
This is how rare your body is compared to the rest of the world. Only 10% of people have something called Darwin's tubercle. It's this little bump on the outside of your ear. And it's said that people who have this are better at sensing voice tonality. 10% of people also have what's called Morton's toe. This is where your big toe is shorter than the toe next to it. Only 26% of people have a narrator inside their head. Most people don't hear a voice when they think. What's even more rare is only 5% of people have their tongues tied to their mouth. I thought everyone had this. Everyone flares their nostrils subconsciously, but only 30% of people can do it on command. Less than 1% of people have unbreakable bones, making you basically superhuman. Only about 35% of people can gleek, and only 1% can do it on command. And gleeking is when you squirt saliva from underneath your tongue.
In the middle of a raging war in Iran, Israel carried out a really strange operation in Lebanon. Dig up a cemetery to look for the remains of a man that has been missing for over 4 decades. You see, overnight during a covert operation, Israeli commanders went boots on the ground near the town of Nabi Chit with the cemetery as their target. As they made their way through the buildings, they were detected by Hezbollah fighters and gunfire broke out. To provide cover for these soldiers, IDF jets flew overhead and carried out at least 40 airstrikes on the town, completely leveling some buildings and creating massive craters. Israeli forces eventually made it to the cemetery, where they then dug up a grave they suspected held the remains of Ron Arad, an Israeli pilot who went missing in Lebanon in 1986. He disappeared after parachuting from a fighter jet that then crashed, and has since become one of the most famous unresolved cases in Israeli military history. But their latest attempt to recover his remains failed again. The grave was empty. The operation, however, came at a high cost. Lebanon's health ministry said that 41 people were killed, which includes at least 3 Lebanese soldiers and civilians, including children. This is despite Ron Arad's own widow warning against risking lives to search for him, saying, "We want to know what happened to Ron, but not at any price. The sanctity of life is above any closing of the circle of certainty."
On the afternoon of October 11th, 2016, a middle-aged man named Carlos Herrera Sr. entered the visitation area of a prison in Venezuela. And right in front of Juan was one table where there was this bedraggled-looking prisoner who he was there to meet, the inmate. He really looked terrible. I mean, his cheekbones were sticking out, he was sort of emaciated, he was bloodied and bruised, he had bandages on his arm. And also, over the past month, this prison had been on lockdown because a gang inside the prison had risen up and overpowered the guards and completely taken over for this entire month. And just to be clear, I mean, during this month, people died as a result of this takeover. And Juan knew all this, not only because this riot was all over the news while it was going on, but also because his own son, Juan Jr., was serving time in this prison for robbery. However, Juan Sr. was not coming to visit his son right now. Instead, he was coming to visit a different prisoner, because during this riot, Juan Jr. had just disappeared. And so Juan sat down at this table with this prisoner, and after the two of them introduced themselves, very quickly, Juan Sr. said, "Please tell me what happened to my son, where is he?" But this prisoner he was talking to didn't immediately get into sort of a clear story about Juan Jr. This guy began talking about a totally separate prisoner, a man named Doranhel Vargas. Vargas was notorious across Venezuela for a series of brutal murders he committed that ultimately put him in this prison. And during this recent riot at this prison, it was Vargas and his gang that rose up and took over. And so even though he was terrorizing people and brutalizing people and was very much responsible for the deaths of multiple inmates, he also at the same time did have to make sure that the people he was in charge of, albeit illegally, had enough food, they had enough supplies. And this prisoner told Juan Sr. that if anybody got in the way of Vargas while he was in charge during this riot, they were basically beaten to within an inch of their lives. And again, in some cases, people were killed. And so Juan Sr. is like, "Oh my goodness, is that what happened to my son? Was he beaten like you by Vargas?" But at that point, the prisoner just shook his head and said no. And then he looked down and almost like couldn't make eye contact with Juan Sr. And he just said, "What happened to your son was much worse." The prisoner would tell Juan Sr. that at some point during the riot, his son, Juan Jr., was tapped by Vargas to help with something. And the thing he was tapped to help Vargas with was distributing food to the inmates. And so Jr. was told, like, "Hey, you need to help us provide food to these inmates." So Jr. basically agreed to do it, at which point he was informed exactly what role he was playing in finding food. Instead of going out and looking for this food, Jr. was the food. Vargas and his gang cornered Jr., beat him to death, butchered his body, and then literally fed him to the inmates. That's what
Their true crime story of how they were caught. In Fort Worth, Texas, Glenda Furch always attended church on Sunday, but one Sunday she didn't show up. Her daughter went to her apartment and found she was not there, but her car was missing. Police went inside her apartment and found signs of foul play. They noticed there was a lot of recent cleaning and found a large bleach stain on the carpet. When forensics tested it, they weren't able to recover blood evidence, just the bleach. Someone had wiped down all the faucets and doorknobs and lights, and only Glenda's fingerprints were on scene. The person went as far as vacuuming her apartment to remove evidence of fibers or hairs and even collected the vacuum. Neighbors then told police they believed they saw someone driving her gold Mazda in and out of the apartment complex and saw someone leaving her apartment the day she went missing. One of the neighbors believed that this person had walked to the dumpster, so police decided to check out the apartment dumpsters. Police found some disturbing possible evidence as they found Glenda's blouse had been slit all the way up from the back. They found an empty container of bleach. They found used duct tape and also another roll of duct tape. Also found electrical cords with knots. In one bag, they did find some cleaning products along with some empty soda cans. Back at Glenda's apartment, they learned that she had a permit for a gun, which was missing. 5 days later, police responded to a vehicle on fire at a car wash. They determined an accelerant was used and the license plates were removed, but the VIN number proved to be Glenda's Mazda. A month later in Dallas, police saw a man in a stolen vehicle who led them on a high-speed chase. The man was later apprehended after his vehicle wrecked, and he was identified as Rodney Owens. Rodney Owens was a career criminal who was unemployed, and he had a bag in his possession, which police searched. Police found a roll of duct tape with an uncommon brand name. That same brand was found at the dumpster of Glenda's apartment. They also found electrical cords that were tied in the same knots found in the dumpster at Glenda's apartment. They found a handgun and a hunting knife. The empty soda cans with saliva matched Rodney's DNA, along with the partial fingerprint found on the soda cans. His prints were on the cardboard spool of duct tape. They also matched semen on a bath towel to Owens. While in jail, Rodney told another inmate that Glenda worked the late shift at GM and lived alone and had a nice vehicle. Police believe the motive was money, and they were willing to give Rodney a lighter sentence if they would help locate Glenda's body, but he refused. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to Glenda, and her body has not been recovered. But that was how he was caught.
These photographs found in the Epstein files reference a very famous book written about a pedophilic relationship. As you can see on this, I'm assuming this is a victim's chest, it looks like, is written at the very top, Lolita. Taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate, I think that says, to tap at 3 on the teeth. And actually, there are a number of photos from the Epstein files showing quotes from this work, Lolita, literally written on the bodies of what I believe are victims. This one is extremely telling. I mean, you can literally see Lolita in the background behind this, what I'm assuming is victim's foot. The quote says she was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. And then there you go. She was, I think this says Dolly at school, but these are all, according to my research, pictures of a victim or victims who wrote these quotes on their bodies. So Lolita, like I said, is a very infamous book which depicts a relationship, which I don't really think is ever really a relationship, but a relationship nonetheless between an adult, an older man, and a very young teenaged girl. And you may know, but this book was infamously adapted into Stanley Kubrick's film Lolita, which depicted that relationship. But it's known that Epstein had an absolute obsession with that book and movie. He nicknamed his plane, his private jet, the Lolita Express. There are a number of photos that have stemmed from the Epstein files, which clearly show copies of Lolita in and around Epstein's home and properties. He collected these works, so he had an obsession with the story and the movie and the book. So to see this sort of a thing written on the body or bodies of a victim or victims is incredibly disturbing. And I want to remind you again, as I do at the end of every one of these videos, this is probably my 150th video so far, the DOJ and the FBI believe that nobody should be held accountable for the rape of these young victims. They are trying to tell you that not one other person molested one of these victims. It was only Jeffrey Epstein. He never brought any of these victims to any other men. And this was all just totally normal, the totally normal workings of an elite pedophile. We know that that isn't true, but we need to get more angry. You need to make your voices heard. You need to tweet your representatives, call your representatives, make videos, make posts online. We need to protest, if we're being honest. I would love to start a protest or get a protest set up and lined up, because we're just not.
This woman murdered someone and then impersonated them for many years. In 2012, Dave Krupra met Carrie Farver when she walked into his workplace. They quickly hit it off, but they both agreed that they weren't looking for a serious relationship. With that being said, Dave was seeing another woman named Liz before getting with Carrie. One afternoon, Carrie and Dave go back to his apartment to hang out, and all of a sudden, Liz arrives to collect some of her stuff. Carrie wasn't fazed at all, and even though Liz pretended to be unbothered, it was clear that this wasn't the case. A few weeks later, Carrie asked Dave if she could spend a couple of nights at his apartment because she had a big project at work, and Dave lived really close to her work, so it would be really easy for her to go in the mornings. Dave said sure, so they spent the night, and the next morning when Dave went to work, he received a text from Carrie basically asking him if they should move in together. Dave thought this was random and strange because they had already agreed that they didn't want a serious relationship, so he said no. He then received a text back from Carrie basically saying that she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. Even though they broke things off, Dave continued receiving threatening emails and texts from Carrie, and many of these emails were threats towards Dave's ex-girlfriend, Liz. Carrie's family also began receiving bizarre text messages from her saying that she quit her job and moved to Kansas. Her family could not get a hold of her, so they knew something was wrong. They reported her missing, but police felt like they couldn't do much because Carrie was a grown woman and she still appeared to be alive. In 2013, Dave found Carrie's car abandoned at his apartment complex, and the only thing inside was a container with an unknown fingerprint. 3 years later, police decided to finally start investigating Carrie's case, and in the meantime, Dave and Liz continued receiving threatening emails and texts from Carrie. Not long after, investigators noticed that Liz was at the police station filing a harassment report, but not against Carrie. This time it was against David's other ex-girlfriend. They began focusing on Liz and found out that she had been impersonating Carrie all these years in a jealous attempt to win Dave back. The fingerprint in Carrie's car belonged to Liz. All the messages were sent by Liz, and police found a memory card that belonged to Liz that had a photo of Carrie deceased. So Liz was found guilty for Carrie's murder and was sentenced to life in prison.
If you're afraid of the water, you might want to avoid Scotland because you could run into one of these creatures. They're called the kelpie. The kelpie are ancient shapeshifters in Scottish mythology which can take on either the form of a terrifying water horse or a beautiful human woman. Make no mistake though, they are just as dangerous in their human form as they are in their horse form, and they only use it to lure unsuspecting fishermen into the depths of the water where they drown them. They are said to be evil creatures who enjoy the taste of human livers and take delight in drowning people into the depths of the water. They also prey on children. Taking advantage of the fact that most kids love animals, they will appear in their original form and offer the kids of the town a ride before going straight into the ocean. And they can even extend their back to hold as many people as possible, thus causing as much damage as possible. Like this video if you think you could survive their tricks, and follow for more.
I'm hit! What? I'm in the car! I shot through the car! Oh!
The incident took place in Florida. A man named Marquez had gotten into an argument with his girlfriend. To cool off, he drove away in her car. However, his girlfriend called the police, claiming that Marquez had threatened her and taken her vehicle.
I don't even know what the argument is about. I just want my car. I don't want to deal with anything. I know anytime we get into it, whether I'm right or wrong, he puts his hands on me or he threatens to put his hands on me. It gets very violent. There he is.
After being contacted, Marquez voluntarily returned to the scene and fully cooperated with officers during a pat-down. Just as officers were confirming he had no weapons and preparing to place him in the patrol car, Marquez tried to speak with the supervising officer, but was immediately shut down.
Can I talk to that?
No.
Marquis looked visibly frustrated and helpless. The situation could have ended calmly right there. But what happened next became the most explosive turning point of the incident.
I'm gonna call my mom.
Yeah, call her real quick.
I just want my car. I don't care about anything else. I'm over it. I've been with this 3 years.
As she watched her boyfriend being placed into the patrol car, the girlfriend appeared emotional, telling the supervisor about their past and the good times they had shared. However, after briefly calming down, she suddenly picked up her phone and reported that Marquis often carried a weapon.
But yeah, he has more than one weapon, and I just wouldn't think he'd have it in my car or toting it around or anything like that. But he's sending me a picture.
Upon hearing that Marquis might be armed, officers immediately went on high alert. They conducted another search. As Officer Jesse approached the patrol car, an acorn fell onto the roof of the vehicle, and that's when things took a shocking turn.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired!
Things you didn't know about the Serbia school tragedy, part 2. He unloaded 52 shots in 2 minutes. So after murdering a security guard, 2 hall monitors, and then walking into his history class, shooting his teacher, luckily she survived, and then murdering 7 students and injuring 6 more, 13-year-old Kosta Kecmanovic ran out to the school courtyard and called the cops on himself. And then when he called, he said that he shot because he's a psychopath and that he thought it was the right thing to do by calling the cops. He ended up killing 10 people that day: the security guard, the 2 hall monitors, and then 7 students. 6 were girls, 1 was a boy, and then he injured 6 other people. He wrote out a hit list and took it with him. It had 16 names on it, and of those 16 names, 3 of them died. And because he was only 13 when he was first arrested, they covered his head right here so the public couldn't figure out who he was. And this was another one that they released, but eventually people figured out who it was, and then they released his full name and photo. And what makes this story even crazier is that there was a law in Serbia at the time that said that you couldn't charge a child with a criminal charge until they were the age of 14. And he was 1 month away from being 14 at the time, but they couldn't charge him criminally. They did put him in a psychiatric hospital, but apparently he can still use phones, talk to other kids, and eventually he will be let out and likely will change his name, but will have freedom. But they did charge his parents. His dad ended up getting 14 years for not putting the guns in a safe place, essentially, because he did hack into the safe, but they were saying if he was able to get into the safe that easily, then they weren't really secure. And they gave his mom 3 years as well. And his parents had actually taken him to a local gun range, and that's where he learned how to use them. And so they went and charged the owner of that place as well, and he ended up getting a year. And after this happened, within a couple weeks, 82 arrests were made from people saying that they were either going to do a copycat version of it or something similar, and no one actually did, but 82 arrests were made. And a lot of them were younger kids that knew that that law existed. Pretty crazy, but what do you think?
Iran has chosen to attack at least 10 other countries, many of them your Arab neighbors. None of them were involved in this war. Why are you attacking your Muslim neighbors during the holy month of Ramadan?
Oh, please don't mistake. We have not attacked our neighbors. We have not attacked Muslim countries. We have attacked Americans' targets and Americans' bases, Americans' installations, which are unfortunately located in the soils of our neighbors. So we have made it clear for them. I have been in touch with their foreign ministers, and I have explained that we are not targeting you. We have no problem with you. We are only targeting the American installations and American bases. And the reason is obvious.
But Minister, Iran is hitting civilian targets, striking hotels, high-rise apartments, airports in many of these countries. Those are not military targets.
Well, no, we have targeted wherever the Americans are. Maybe there have been some collateral damages, as it is in every war. Look, more than 70,000 people were killed in Gaza by Israelis, and Israeli army called all of them collateral damage. So yes, there is the possibility of collateral damages in this situation as well. This is what we have warned everybody in the region beforehand, that if the US attack us, we have no way but to attack their installations which are in your territories, and then everything may go out of hand, and the war would become a disaster for the whole region. This is what we have warned, and many others have warned, and many Americans have also warned the US administration to not repeat the same mistake. They have done it before in our region, and this is what they have done. This war is not our war. This is not our choice. This is a war of choice by the United States.
This is, without a doubt, the most terrifying abandoned animatronic that has ever existed. Watch this, and then we'll talk about it. It is an absolutely massive animatronic of Moby Dick that is abandoned in a lake, completely submerged, and has been there under the water since the 1960s, completely left alone there to rot. It's in Wakefield, Massachusetts. They used to have this thing in the 50s and 60s where you'd go on this boat and you'd go on this lake with this abandoned animatronic. First off, never could be me. It's also so massive that you can see bro from Google Earth. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you some found footage of it completely submerged, and you can see its eyeball. So if you have submechanophobia, you're really gonna hate this video. This is how big it is in comparison to people. These are the people that made it, and it was on a hydraulic system that went up and down in that water. Me with a massive phobia of whales and abandoned things and submechanophobia, this is the final boss of my fears. Watch this video of it completely submerged, of someone with an underwater drone that put it under there, and it is like right next to the whale when it shows it completely underwater. It is disgusting. Let me know how you feel, and I dare you to watch this full video without clicking off.
This is Miss Pac-Man, one of the worst videos on the internet explained. The video that I'm about to explain is about 1 minute long, and it starts in a dark room. And the first thing you notice is the screaming in the background. The camera then pans to the floor, revealing a severed hand, and it then pans to the bed which Alejandro Eco Chubb is on. The bed was soaked in blood, and Alejandro had both of her hands cut off, and at this point you can see the full extent of her injuries. Alejandra had been hit in the face so hard with a machete that she had a horizontal wound going across her face that was so deep it actually reached her ears. The wound was halfway up her face, right in the middle of her nose, and it was horizontal, hence the name of the video, Miss Pac-Man, because the wound was so deep it looked like an exaggerated mouth. But the disturbing thing is, Alejandra is still alive, and at this point you discover the screaming in the background isn't her, but actually someone else in the house, and according to rumors and reports, it's actually her children. The camera then pans to her face, and it shows she is still aware and conscious. Her eyes moving across the room in complete pain and fear. You hear her struggling to breathe due to the insane amount of blood, and you hear constant gurgling as she tries to hang on to her life. You also hear her try to breathe, but due to the injury, it's extremely muffled. It almost sounds like a young baby crying. You also hear a male's voice behind the camera. Now, the question is this the neighbors who discovered her? And if it is, why in the world are they recording her? Or was it her partner who was responsible for this brutal murder? The camera stays on Alejandra's face for about 30 to 40 seconds, and you see her withering in pain. You hear her trying to scream, and at one point the camera goes closer to her wound, and at this point you see just how deep the wound really is. It's literally 3/4 of the way through her head. This is a very hard watch. You don't see the awful act committed on camera, but seeing the aftermath is traumatizing. Alejandro was pronounced dead after this video was taken. This video is considered one of the worst, and its brutality is compared to Funky Town, 3 Guys 1 Hammer, and much more. Nobody knows how this video ended up on the internet, and it remains a mystery. Whatever you do, don't go searching for the video or picture. It's way different than a regular cartel video, and it's more of a real-life horror video. A complete living nightmare for those in the room. Trust me, it will mess you up completely. Rest in peace to Alejandro Eco Chubb. This is absolutely sickening, and I can't believe people who do stuff like this